Cary Valentine here at the Baker University School of Professional and Graduate Studies, going into week 2 of BBL473 Project Leadership. And again, I'm Cary Valentine. If you don't recognize me from last week, I got the glasses on this week because I'm cheating with my iPad this week. It's Sunday night, and I'm here summing up our week's activities and looking over your post. It was great stuff. You did a great job on the forums. There's a few things I want to highlight here that are important to know as we go into the next week. To start with this, one of your classmates noted, here's a couple of things they said, and I won't say specifically who they are because we're kind of in a public forum here using the video embeds of some sort on broader platforms like YouTube. But here's something that an individual said. If you said it, you know who you are. So John initially felt overwhelmed. This is regarding the Baltimore project that we used for our case study analysis last week. John initially felt overwhelmed just after agreeing to take on this project. Okay, a lot of people feel overwhelmed when they get a lot of things to do, or they have a new project they're going to work on, right? So that's not abnormal. So that's a good thing. But you know, some of your classmates were really smart with their observation. They went further. They said one actually said that she hoped that John's manager, Mrs. Burns or Bynes, I think is how it's said, was not setting up John to be a scapegoat. Wow, you know, that's an excellent observation, because a lot of us that have worked in organizations and professions for a long time know what scapegoating is very clearly. So hopefully that's not the case. So that's a great point as well. But yet another person went further, and they said that they had read about the observation of John being nervous, and that the job or project had been, say, dumped on him. Dumped. Okay, dumped. Wow. That's a bad feeling with any team member, regardless of what level they're at or what they're doing. Dumped. Okay. How many people here have been dumped by a boyfriend, girlfriend, or friend, or somebody else that you respected, admired, and you were trying to seek their approval? I mean, it stinks to be dumped on. Any feeling in project development that involves somebody feeling like you're being dumped on is not a good way to go. A lot of administrators do it all the time. It's like a technique or a kind of manipulation kind of ploy. Don't do it. That's rule one. You know, avoid the feeling that somebody's getting dumped on. There should really be true buy-in from that person. They bring you an idea about improvement, and they never want to give you any ideas on methods in order to make the improvement that they're seeking. Well, that's one thing. But if you just dump it back on them as a way to kind of respond to that inquiry, not a good move. Please don't do that. So that's rule one. Make sure you don't leave that image of dumping a project on someone. That doesn't tend to work out. It tends to be a waste of money and time. It tends to cause embarrassment, and that's not what a project management team is supposed to do. They're supposed to solve a problem structurally that the bureaucracy or the traditional hierarchy or host organization can't solve. And that's because of how they're set up. They have to have a bureaucratic structure there in place in order for there to be a project team. They have that larger hierarchy, regardless of how bureaucratic it might be, has to be there in order to meet certain necessities in order for there actually to be an organization for all of us to work for. So you can't criticize it too much, even though it has some things it can't do that a project team can't. So rule one, don't dump on people project-wise. Another thing that some of your classmates put out were really great was about mission statements. Some people said, you know, John needed a mission statement in order to get specific things done, to know where to go, to have a roadmap at the outset to move and to get things going. That's a great observation. It seems really simple, but a lot of organizations don't do it. And an example of that being the case, how many people here could say immediately that they know what their organization's mission statement currently is? You know, how many of you know verbatim what the mission statement for the organization you work for is? What is it? Most of the people I've asked over the years will not say they know it. You know, they'll say, well, it's something about, you know, we're supposed to serve people in this particular audience and group of stakeholders and something like that. And it'll be something that they maybe put on a website or a marketing piece to make them look really cool. But in the end, it's not really what it's supposed to be, which is a shared organizational value that they're all working towards. So that moves me here into rule two. A mission or articulated need or value the organization has is particularly important in project teams, even though we know it's not generally seen as being as important by traditional hierarchies that are out there. It's really, really important in a project team for it to be there. And the reason is because it's a short-lived organization. It's a very small one. You really got to have a sense of purpose. It's got to really be clearly mapped out, or you're done before you begin. So that's rule 2. Now, on to another thing here. A couple of your classmates actually championed this idea of quantifying or forecasting things, which is excellent. We have to do that. Most of us know that have worked in professions for years that if you can't quantify something, you're probably not going to get financing for it. So it's really important to do that. We had somebody talking about risk versus cost assessment. Excellent. Obviously, that person's had some project management experience as well. Another student talked about cost-benefit analysis. Excellent. Both somewhat similar instruments, slightly different, but they're both kind of tools to quantify and forecast and guide decision-making down the road. Okay? So really good stuff. But here's the rule I'm going to lead that to. A lot of people, again, remember I talked about this last week, how traditional organizations are kind of bureaucratic. When we think of bureaucracy, we think of red tape. We usually think of something that's kind of not so good. The truth is, we have to have bureaucracies. They're, as the sociologist Max Weber said, they're human. They're a structure set up to kind of govern human activity to some sort of an activity that's going to actually be productive and be efficient. And efficiency usually means, in our paradigm, to cost less money, to use less resources, to get more done with less. And so if you think about that, governments are like that way, homes are like that, our families are kind of like that, really. I mean, a lot of us want to get more for our buck, right? We don't have to give as much of our hard-earned money to the grocery store if we don't have to. If we can still get good goods and services, we want to be able to get that without paying much more than we have to, right? So we have to have that stuff. We want it safe, we want certain things to happen, but we have to have bureaucracy to some extent to make that work, okay? It's the same thing in project management and its dealings with the host organization that they're doing work for, okay? A host organization has their bureaucracy and their hierarchy set up in order to achieve certain things legally from a foundation perspective. And even though they can't solve certain problems that you need to set up a project management team for, you don't want to ever put them in enmity somehow with the host organization, a project team that is. So rule 3, don't ever set up one way, indirectly, overtly, covertly, or any way, the project team in enmity with the host organization. Why? Okay. To say it another way, well, think about this. People that work on a project team are usually going to have to do business with people within the hierarchy, so if you tick them off, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of cooperation. You might go backwards even, and usually a lot of organizations have done that. So really important to not use that approach. A lot of people try that. They want to try to embarrass the organization somehow, or show certain people in the organization, or teach them a lesson of some sort. Not a good way to do that if that's what your goal is. So that's rule 3. Don't set them up in enmity with the organization. You're really going to have trouble meeting your deliverables if that's the case. So good stuff in that form. Okay, so the next week's form is where we're heading now. Now, what I want to talk about here is, if you look in the book, I believe it's page 96, there's a mention about qualitative inquiry, or assessment in project management science, as well as quantitative forecasting and project management science. Qualitative tends to be a form of inquiry and research and organizational studies as something that is the how and the why something tends to occur. The how and the why a phenomenon occurs. It tends to be something a little bit more abstract and broadly defined, and that makes it difficult for some people to really think about qualitative inquiry. Whereas quantitative inquiry tends to do with units of measurement or numbers, things that are mathematical, like the amount of money, the amount of time, how many people, and how many widgets, things like that. That's the quantitative inquiry. So that's fairly easy to do. In this week's form, if you go to chapter 6, you're going to go to page, I believe it is, it's 116. All right, yeah, okay. There's 3 things mentioned there under the heading of what is a successful team. The subheadings below that, chapter 6, it talks about, let's see, where are they? Okay, yeah. What is a successful team? The subheadings are successful teams deliver the goods. Okay, that means they meet deliverables, okay? So how do you recruit people in order to deliver the goods? That's what chapter 6 is about, recruiting and filling roles within the project team. So from a qualitative aspect, what you need to find out is you can do one of the 3 here. that are on 116 and go on to 118, I believe, under the heading, what is a successful team? I want to know if you're trying to qualitatively learn about the type of individual that would be likely to deliver on the goods on the project that you're trying to recruit them for. From a qualitative perspective, how would you, what kind of questions would you ask? What kind of inquiry would you take? Go to Google Books if you want, read up little excerpts and blurbs on qualitative inquiry. It tends to be a little harder for people, but I think you're going to do great on this. If not, call me up. I'll mentor you through it over the phone. We'll get you through it. But you got to learn about how to do qualitative inquiry to really make these project teams really, really effective. And so you'll start with that. The other two subheadings are, we talked about the successful teams deliver on the goods. Successful teams get better. Successful teams are satisfied and committed. How do successful teams get better? Well, that means they use what they learned effectively to not make the same mistakes in the future, or to guide the decision making in the future. In the end, that's really what a project team should provide the host organization when everything's all said and done. That should be one of the deliverables. It should also benefit from a thing we call human capital, which means that people put forth this effort, and how do we keep that benefit within the organization? We don't let it escape. So really important. And when it comes to successful teams are satisfied and committed, again, these are those subheadings under the heading, what is a successful team, on page 116. People that are satisfied and committed to a team's goals and values tend to work cheaper, faster, and better than those that are not satisfied and committed. That's a theoretical kind of thing that has been pursued and studied for years and years and years. You'll see it when you do your inquiry like you did last week in the scholarly material regarding satisfaction and commitment, if you choose to work on that heading. But pick one of those three headings under that idea of what successful teams are, again starting on page 116, and tell me from a qualitative perspective first how or what questions or what process you would go through finding somebody to fill that need from a qualitative inquiry point of view. Clearly figure out what qualitative is and describe the things that you would do in order to do qualitative inquiry on filling certain roles and finding players to work on your team. So that's important as we're talking about project development. The next thing you do is you're going to have to look and think about what questions or what information you would have to get from a quantitative perspective. A quantitative perspective, that's back to numbers, units, money, time, how many, widgets, things like that that come in units are quantitative. That's usually easier because we tend to think a lot in organizations these days about quantitative. The problem is we don't think too much about qualitative. So I got to get you kind of coached into looking into qualitative inquiry this week. And that's where we're going. So I'm going to put more notes in the forum for you and so you can be guided on this week's forum. Keep it up. You're doing great. You're doing awesome. Again, this is probably the best class in the first forum at using scholarly sources for their arguments better than I think I've seen since I've been teaching here. So you're doing great. Just great stuff. Call me. I'm here if you need me. And have a great week. I'll be here. Bye.